Welcome everybody to another special edition of the Keeping Score podcast. I'm your host, Josh Amick, and my special guest today with me is the Glacier Wolfpack girls basketball coach, Amanda Cram. So, Amanda, you were talking to me a little bit about this earlier. You've been a coach here at the Wolfpack for 10 years. You became the head coach 6 years ago. How did you get that connection with Glacier? Are you from here, or how did you end up becoming a Wolfpack coach?
I am not from the Valley. I actually grew up in Ohio. When I was 25, I made the move to Montana like so many people do. And I landed outside of Bozeman, so I coached and taught in a small Class B school for a couple of years. And then when my husband had the opportunity to shift careers and move up here, we certainly jumped at the chance. And luckily, Glacier was so courteous enough to hire me.
Okay, so in your time in Ohio, where I'm sure you grew up there most of your life, did you play high school level? Did you play college level? Or how did you fall in love with the game of basketball?
So many different stories, right?
Okay.
Certainly, as a high school student, I was an athlete. I participated in a lot of different things. I really was a great track athlete. I mean, not to be, less than
No, he was fine.
but
That's fine. I don't know.
Yeah. That certainly was my gift athletically. So when I had the opportunity to go to college, I ran cross country and did indoor and outdoor track, but always just kind of had the basketball bug and, played intramurals and kept playing even after college. And then once I got into teaching, and basically someone walked up and said, "Oh, hey girl, you're tall, you're going to coach basketball."
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't think I was ready, but that first season, with some middle school kids and some developing high school athletes, I just really fell in love with the game even more then.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I am new to this area. Only been here for 6 months, but you do coach track as well still.
Yes, I do. I coached kind of on and off, and then just rejoined Glacier Wolfpack track last spring.
So it seems like the coaching kind of just fell into your lap. What was the learning curve like, being someone who just seems like you love the game, but never really had that experience coaching basketball at all? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And what you do as an athlete is completely different than what you do as a coach. Certainly, you have to learn the basics, planning practices, the schemes that are going to be great for your team. But more than that, it's, how do you manage a team? How do you encourage young people to be their best selves while also teaching them, about the game, but about the greater characteristics in life. And so just balancing that as a young coach is every day is new, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I am working, less hard, certainly not than I was to start with, but what you have to learn changes. And so if you have the ability to coach, I think that you should, but it's a roller coaster for sure.
So started out as just like an assistant coach, I'm assuming. You did that for 4 years. When you had the opportunity to become a head coach, did your mindset change? I want to be a coach now. You're more locked in. You're more comfortable after the 4 years of kind of learning the whole game and learning all those nuances that you just spoke on?
Yes and no. I mean, as an assistant coach, I coach sophomores, I coach freshmen. I was really involved with what the varsity team was doing, and I honestly don't think I coached any different for varsity girls than I did for freshman girls. The practices look different. The stress can sometimes be a little different, but those years that I was an assistant, I really took that time to learn as much as I could. There have been so many great coaches before me, whether I was coaching basketball or volleyball or track, that I just glommed on to everything that they could teach me and took that and eventually, I've made it my own. But you're just always learning and you're always trying to be the best coach you can no matter the level.
Speaking of all of your coaching experience, team is 5-4 on the season, correct?
Mm-hmm.
3-2 in conference play.
Mm-hmm.
How is this year stacked up compared to other years? And not just so much the record. I can look at the record and say, this team went 7-10, or this team went 12-12. That doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. You talked to me earlier this year saying that you think that this team is capable of winning Western. So why do you feel that way? And how is this team different than the teams that you've coached in the last 6 years?
I've had some incredible teams, some really gifted athletes in the past 6 years. Seasons of high success and seasons where we just didn't quite get there. This team, you just have to know these girls. They're special, and it's not just because they're basketball players. It's because they are focused on the goal. And every day they come into practice just ready to go, to be students of the game. But more importantly, they just support each other. And when you have, a small group of young women that want to work hard, hold each other accountable, like great things are just bound to happen. And I really started to see that kind of coming to fruition towards the end of last season. And of course, we had a great summer, but it's always disjointed. But I don't know, that feeling just started to kind of burn a little bit, which of course made me work harder in the off season to prepare. And as soon as we stepped onto the court for day one of tryouts, it was like recognizable that these girls want to get it done. They want to climb through the peaks and the valleys of the season. And maybe we haven't had all of the success that we have been planning for, but also recognize there's a lot of season left, and just their work ethic is what sets them apart.
Well, we do have to talk about some of the success that you had. For the first time in Glacier's history, a few weeks back, you swept the Helena teams. What was that like? Did you know that going in after you won the first matchup, like, we have a chance to make history? Or did you kind of keep it on the hush until after it was all said and done? Like, and by the way, you just set a record,
Honestly, I had no idea.
Okay, fair enough.
And usually I pride myself on, I know what every team has done, the matchups, the scores. I end up watching all of the games in AA, and I have, pretty solid understanding of Glacier's history. But for us, it was just another weekend. We knew that we could be competitive with both of the teams, and that's what we set out to do. But when our AD, Mark Dennehy, peeked into the team room, in the middle of our post game, and he said, "Hey, by the way," and announced that exciting news. It was almost like silent in the room, like, no way.
Okay.
And I think it just speaks to how special this team is, and that it doesn't matter who the opponent is or what day of the league, that they're just going to battle and get after it. But certainly that was a very special surprise.
Yeah, I spoke to Reese last week, and she said that she had no idea either, and she was like, it might have been a good thing that we didn't know, because we didn't feel any sort of pressure. We were playing free. So that's something I do like to talk about. Speaking of pressure, or you guys showed that it wasn't too much, the crosstown matchup last week. It's always the biggest event in town, the rivalry between this school and Flathead. You guys held Flathead to 6 points in the second half. I thought that was crazy. How did you do that, and how did this matchup with Flathead compare to the years before? What was the environment like with you guys being the late game and having kind of all eyes on you?
To speak to being the late game, I think it's been quite a few years since the girls have actually played that late game.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's different reasons for that that we don't know, but we really took that as this is the prime show, right? Like, we feel that people are here to see us. People in the community have reached out often saying, we enjoy watching girls basketball in this community now, and that you're a part of it. And so we took a lot of pride in that. There's always the unsettling feeling, like, are we going to have a crowd? But our community, like you said, is amazing, and they show up whether they have a kid on the court or not. So I want to say it was a surprising outcome, but it wasn't. Because again, it just goes back to what the girls are willing to do. And as our identity forms more and more each day, it becomes apparent of how we need to play and not stray too far from that.
Something I've always been interested in as a self-proclaimed hoop head myself. Something that happens a lot at the high school level, kind of trails off in college, really trails off in the NBA, WNBA, is teams tend to naturally, at the high school level, go into a zone defense. Mm-hmm. I'm always curious because there's different variations, 2-3 zone, 1-3-1. Sometimes, that switches up. You have a lot of teams do high posts, a lot of teams do the baseline cutter. Some teams just do crisp passes, swing passes, and gets people open. What have you seen to be the most effective way to beat the zone as far as coaching goes? Does it change on the playmakers you have? Or is it all about how they're playing the zone? Are they playing too far up? Are they sagging off a little bit? How do you beat the zone that so many high school teams naturally go to?
I want to give away all my secrets.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have some to share.
A little bit.
Zones are tough, right?
Yes.
We really don't play a ton of zone. We obviously will bring it out when we need to, but there's great zones, and then there's zones for teams that aren't able to play man defense, just my opinion. Beating the zone, I think it has a lot to do with personnel. I really trust that we're pretty deep with guards, that they can score the ball at will. But we talk about, the 3 ball is always going to be there, and it's finding the right teammate. This year especially, we've had to focus on using our posts, whether they're at the high post, they're, as we said, sneaking around, being a runner, or we have high-low action. I think in order to beat any zone, one, you have to get it into the middle. Two, you have to be a threat there. And then you also have to have movement around that. So, if it's a 1-2-2, you're always looking to get into the high post. But even against the 2-3, whether, it's a little more difficult to get into high post, but you have to have someone to give the ball to. The more you pass it around, the easier it becomes for the defense. So that inside-out game becomes probably the most important aspect of at least giving yourself an opportunity.
Do you think a lot of teams go to zone because they don't have the capacity to defend man defense? Or do you think because on basketball there's so much communication, more so on the defensive side than on the offensive side? Offensive side to kind of call you plays, let them run the plays. Defense, it's got to switch, you got to know when to drop, when to go up. Do you think that's why so many high school teams naturally do zone? Or do you think it's more so about the personnel that's on the court?
I don't know. I talk with a lot of coaches. A lot of my good friends are basketball coaches, and everyone seems to have a different opinion. I think everyone knows that, I love man, and I do firmly believe, probably because I was taught this at a young age, and it's been repeated to me through other coaches, that you can't be a great zone basketball team unless you can guard man. And
very true.
Because truly you're guarding a zone, but you're also guarding people, and you have to be able to move and react quickly. I think that depending on your personnel, that zone might be the better choice for you, right? Or your opponent's personnel. If you don't have the foot speed that other teams have, then maybe you do want to go into a 2-3 or dabble in a 1-3-1. I like to change things up quite a bit, but also it depends on who you're playing. If your opponent is like Billings West, who always just has these giant women on their team, right, that can just pound it in, then of course maybe you do need to be able to test their hand at the perimeter and take away some of the looks for their big. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I'm just in my lifetime, how much the zones have progressed and evolved is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Just last night I was watching a game and they were in a 2-1-2, and I was
yeah, there's some zones you can do 2-3 zone, but you're really playing man. It's just a different form of man defense.
Yeah.
But it looks like a zone, but it's really not because everyone's responsible for one player. But speaking of opponents, you got some matchups this week with the Missoula teams. Thursday, I believe you have Sentinel first, correct?
We have
Hellgate first, and then Sentinel on Saturday. Mm-hmm. What are you expecting in both of those matchups? What do they like to run on offense and defense, and where do you think that the team could be successful?
Both teams played really hard. Clearly, they are working hard for each other. Their coaches have put that as part of something that they do. But they are both very different teams as far as their offensive abilities. Since we have Hellgate on Thursday, that's been kind of our early week practice focus, mm-hmm. and they play a lot of man. They aren't tall, but they are long. They love to push out in transition, which of course we do too. So expecting a little bit of a track meet.
Okay. Right up your alley.
Yes. Bring it on. They just do some really nice things. When they're not in man, they have a pretty active 1-2-2 zone, which seems to kind of be the zone of Western AA right now.
Okay.
Everyone's dabbling in it, ourselves included. I think Hellgate's going to be an incredible game. If anything, our personnel really mirrors their personnel. And of course, I'm biased with our team, but I think we're a little bit more put together with that. Although, obviously, our bench right now is pretty thin, where they have a little bit more depth. But I think it's going to be a great game, possibly down to the wire. But, the way that we can be successful is doing the same things that we did last week at Crosstown, rebounding the basketball, valuing the basketball, causing chaos in the full court, and just letting the half-court possessions play out.
Yeah. And then what are you expecting for your Saturday matchup?
Saturday's going to be fun. It's another doubleheader with the boys. It's basketball all day long. Everyone should come, right?
Yeah.
Sentinel, they're under new leadership this year. Coach Size is doing a great job with the girls that he has. They lost a lot of their senior leadership. And so I think that they are still, finding their identity. But certainly, as I mentioned, what sets them apart is just how hard they work. You never see them flustered on the court, even when they have misread an offense or they're not executing exactly how they want. They just keep going. Of course, they have some threats, but they're just a pretty consistent team that if they get the hot hand, then it could be a very, very close game. But again, a great matchup for us size-wise. We look to do things a little bit quicker, I think, and a little bit more pressure. But when you have two teams working hard together, it's anyone's game.
Last week, you only had just the one crosstown matchup, but the week before you had 3 games. How is the team feeling right now, kind of in the midpoint of the season where they had that rough week, kind of had a slowdown week, and then right back to 2 games this week? How is the team feeling? You getting anyone back? How is the health of the team or the energy?
Yeah, there's always a lot of excitement leading up to crosstown, and as a coach, I think that the next days after can be the most challenging. Of course, we feel really great about our performance, but also recognizing that these next 2 games are, going to be very important in the standings. The girls still have their focus. They're still really working hard in the weight room, though, as well. So legs are a little bit tired right now. Energy, because of that, may be a little bit down, but their mental fortitude is there. They understand what we have to do. Having 1 game in a week is awesome because you can really just hone in and prepare for that game. But as a coach, you're always looking like, okay, but what happens next week? What do we need to do in this week that's going to make us better for the following week as well? So I think that's the challenge there. But once we get into games starting on Thursday, the season goes very quickly.
Yeah. What are you expecting for the rest of the season? I know last time we spoke, Maddie was dealing with an ankle injury. How is she progressing?
She is getting better every day. Still looking to see when she can come back, if she can come back. Certainly she wants to be on the course, and her teammates, of course, are just chomping at the bit for her to return. She is a big contributor for us. We're hoping that any day now, but it could be not until next week.
Okay. And as far as the rest of the season goes, how are you going to get to the goals that you set for yourself and set for the team?
It's not going to be easy. I'm going to tell you that. I knew in the beginning that it would be a tight conference. Looking at the standings now, Big Sky, they're incredible. They're doing really well. They're the number 1 seed, but everyone else is kind of squished together between us, Butte, and Hellgate. We're all have the same record. We have a lot of similar wins and losses. And so I definitely see that starting to kind of break apart over the next 2 weeks. But also, the 5 through 8 seeds that are current could, fly right up to the top. So I don't know how it's going to shake out. I know how I want it to shake out.
Of course, yeah.
Right? But we're capable. Obviously every team wants the bye to stay that 1st or 2nd seed. If that's not something that we earn during regular season play, it's super important that we're able to get a home playoff game, so being that 3rd or 4th seed. But still, our expectations are to continue to work hard, aim for those top 2 seeds, so we have a little easier route to City Bozeman this year.
All right. Well, that's all I got for you, Coach. Thank you so much for the time. Your guys' home game on Saturday is at 2 o'clock?
Yes.
All right. So make sure you're here to support the boys and the girls basketball team. The girls play first on Saturday at 2 o'clock. Thank you to Coach Amanda Cram for joining me on the Keeping Score podcast. I've been your host, Josh Amick. We'll see you all next week on another episode of the Keeping Score. Thank you.
Thanks to Corwin Motors for sponsoring the Keeping Score podcast. At Corwin Motors, they're proud to be family-driven for over 100 years. Their commitment goes beyond selling cars. They're dedicated to serving our community and providing you with the highest quality vehicles to fit your lifestyle. Whether you're searching for reliability, style, or comfort, they got you covered. They understand that you rely on their website for accurate and up-to-date information, and it's their promise to deliver relevant, detailed content that meets your needs. So if you're in the market for a new Chevrolet or just want to learn more, visit CorwinMotorsKalispell.com.